All right, this is 101, week 13, part 8. So hedonic adaptation is that thing where you get anything enjoyable, you can get used to, at which point it's not enjoyable so much anymore. It's just like part of the background of your life and you don't think about it anymore. Another great example of hedonic adaptation is if you are a single person. A lot of single people desperately want to be in a romantic relationship, right? And then if you meet somebody and you fall in love with them, you're so fucking excited. But then, if you meet people who have been in a relationship for a long time, they're not excited 10 years later. They're not, I'm not saying they're unhappy, I'm not saying like everybody hates their wives or whatever, but like it's not new and exciting anymore, it's just part of their life, and they're not like, oh, I'm so glad. Like people who have been married for 10 years are very rarely like, oh, I'm so glad you're in my life all the time. They're often like, yeah, that guy didn't do the dishes, he should have done the fucking dishes. Right, you get used to things. And the funny thing is that like married couples are often like, they're just like, whatever, we're married to each other, we're married people, that's it. But their single friends are often like, oh, I wish I had somebody like you do. But then the married people are like, yeah, it's okay, it's, live with somebody else. Right, so like you become used to it. Hedonic adaptation. Okay, let's take a look at what's going on here. All right, so what are we gonna do about that? It follows then, this is the Stoics' advice on dealing with it, regularly reminding yourself that you might lose any of the things you currently enjoy can reverse the adaptation effect. Thinking about the possibility of losing something you value shifts it from the backdrop of your life to center stage, where it can deliver pleasure once more. So if you focus on the fact that life is fragile and things are terrible, that it might bring you more happiness because it will make you appreciate the things that you have. It's an idea. It's an idea. Okay, so let's. This is pretty simple. We can just keep going. God, this is really pretty easy. All right. The second, subtler, and arguably more powerful benefit to this kind of negative thinking is as an antidote to anxiety. Consider how we normally seek to assuage worries, meaning make us feel better about worries about the future. When we seek reassurance, looking to persuade ourselves that everything we seek reassurance, looking to persuade ourselves that everything will be all right in the end, right? When you're worried about something, you ask people, it'll be okay, won't it? He won't die. But reassurance is a double-edged sword, meaning it helps things, but it also harms them. In the short term, it can be wonderful, but like all forms of optimism, it requires constant maintenance. Offer reassurance to a friend who is in the grip of anxiety, and you'll often find that a few days later, he'll be back for more. Worse, reassurance can actually exacerbate anxiety, meaning it can make it worse. When you reassure your friend that the worst-case scenario he fears probably won't occur, you inadvertently, meaning accidentally, reinforce his belief that it would be catastrophic, really bad, if it did. You are tightening the coil of his anxiety, not loosing it. Right? So if someone has a friend who's dying, they're very sick, and they're like, oh, I'm so worried about this person, I hope they don't die. And you go, no, he won't die. He's not gonna die. I promise, he won't die on you. He's gonna make it. Just think positive thoughts. He's gonna make it. He's gonna make it. He's gonna make it. Do you see how that kind of thinking, when you tell somebody, no, that won't happen, that won't happen, that won't happen, you're disagreeing with them because they're like, I'm so worried he's gonna die. And you're like, that's not gonna happen. You're sort of disagreeing with them. But you're sort of agreeing with them because they're thinking, if this person dies, it would be terrible. And you're going, it would be terrible, so it won't happen. You're kind of reinforcing the badness, right? Whereas the thing to do, instead of being, so if somebody has a friend who's dying and they're really worried about it, maybe instead of being, no, he won't die, think positive thoughts, your friend won't die, he'll be fine. Maybe you should be like, yeah, he might die. We should think about that, right? Death is a part of life. It happens, it does happen. And I don't know if it's okay, it's not good, but like, it happens. It's part of life. It's part of, there's the only game in town is that we do not die being sick, we die being alive. So like, obviously we would prefer if the person didn't die, but even if they do die, you had a good life with them, they loved you, I'm sure they were happy to have known you, right? So and then maybe when they die, it's easier. Because if you spent the whole time being like, they won't die, right? And I'm like, yeah, they definitely won't die, they're gonna be fine. And then they die. And that puts us in a bad position, right? So this is the idea of the Stoics. Okay, we're gonna finish this. This is really easy. All too often, the Stoics note, things will not turn out for the best. But it is also true that when they do go wrong, they'll almost certainly go less wrong than you feared. I've been talking about this already. Losing your job is unlikely to condemn you to starvation and death. Losing a relationship won't condemn you to a life of unrelenting, unstopping misery. Those fears are based on irrational judgments about the future. The worst thing about any future event, the Stoic influenced psychologist Albert Ellis used to say, is usually your exaggerated belief in its horror. Spend time vividly imagining exactly how wrong things could go in reality, and you'll often turn bottomless, nebulous fears into finite and manageable ones. Happiness reached via positive thinking is fleeting and brittle. Negative visualization generates a vastly more dependable calm. Albert Ellis is a psychologist he's talking about there, and Albert Ellis invented something incredibly important that I already mentioned, which is called cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a form of therapy, and it's very effective. Now, I think Freudian shit is more fun, but cognitive behavioral therapy actually works, where Freud is weird. But cognitive behavioral therapy, like if you have a phobia, you might go to a psychologist and they might tell you to do cognitive behavioral therapy shit. Well, it's really interesting. When you find out what it is, it's actually kind of neat. So for example, let's say you have a phobia about public speaking. You are terrified of giving a speech in public, right? There are people, I'm sure you know people like this, they're so fucking scared of giving a speech in public. So you know what this psychologist, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is based on Stoicism, right? Goes all the way back to ancient Greece, even though it's a modern, most people who do it now have no idea that it goes back to ancient Greece, but it goes all the way back to ancient Greece. Albert Ellis would make you do something interesting. He would force you to give a public speech. And you're like, that's the exact thing I'm trying to avoid. And he'd be like, no, go do it. Go give a public speech. And he'd make you give a public speech, maybe just in front of 2 people. And then he'd have you do it again in front of 4 people. And then he'd have you do it again in front of 10 people, 20 people, 30 people, 40 people. Why does he do that? He forces you to do it. Why? Because, and by the way, does it go well? No, it doesn't. It's your biggest fear and he's making you do it. And so you get up there and you are fucking terrified to speak in public in front of all these people. But then you do it. And now the positive thinker would be like, and you do it and it's really successful. No. You do your speech in front of all those people and it fails. You're terrible at it. You were worried you'd be a bad public speaker? Turns out you were right. You are a fucking terrible public speaker. But what it does is it teaches you it's not that bad to be a terrible public speaker. You know what happens if you get up and give a bad speech? People go, oh, wasn't great. And that's it. That's it. That's it. And so if you do it enough times, it doesn't mean it's not like, oh, I have a fear of public speaking, and then he forces you to give a public speech and it goes really well. You have a fear of public speaking and he forces you to give a public speech, and then you discover nothing bad happened. Like you were worried this was gonna ruin your life or it was but actually it just sucked and it was bad, but it's okay. Albert Ellis had a patient once that was, I know a little bit about this. Albert Ellis had a patient once who was scared to ask women out on dates. So you know what he had him do? He had him go to Washington Square Park and walk up to every single woman that he saw and just say, would you like to go out on a date with me? And the woman would almost always be like, no. And then he'd go up to another woman and say, would you like to go out on a date? And she'd say, no. And it hurt his feelings, And he'd go up to some other woman and say, would you like to go out on a date? And she'd say, no. And it hurt his feelings again. But here's what he learned. And this is not a story about how somebody said yes and then he met his wife and he lived happily ever after. No, this is not that story. What he did was he was so scared to ask women out on dates that he asked 100 women out on dates. And you know what happened? He felt bad. And you know what he learned? It's okay to feel bad for a couple of seconds or for a minute or a day. It's okay. It's part of life. You're gonna feel bad. It's okay to feel bad. But when you're at home and you're so scared and worried about it, you think, oh my God, if I asked a woman on a date and she rejected me, it'd be the worst thing in the world. It'd ruin my life. I'd be so humiliated forever. But what this guy discovered was, it doesn't feel good to get rejected. But it hurts, it hurts your heart. But not forever. It's not that, but you can handle it. You can handle it, and it's fine. And if you do it 100 times, you even get used to it. And then you're like, you know what? Being rejected sucks, but it's not gonna ruin your life. It's okay to be rejected sometimes. So he got rejected 100 times, and he got his feelings hurt, but hurt feelings are okay. That's the Stoic thing. Positive thinker would say, no, don't think of it. It's gonna go well, it's gonna go well. And then when it goes bad and the woman rejects you, you're really upset. But Albert Ellis said, just keep asking people out, and it'll hurt when they say no, but that's okay. A little hurt, a little pain is part of life. That's the Stoics' point. See you in the next video.